have this story from Sportico with the headline, Vince McMahon lists final TKO shares for sale. The filing that is being referenced here is the finalized listing of shares from Vince McMahon, which were not new. In fact, we had reported on this, Wrestlenomics had reported on this on April 12th, what at this point is 16 days ago, when the preliminary version of this filing came out. Now, this is where this show gets at its most excitement level. There was a preliminary filing listing Vince McMahon's all of his remaining shares for sale, as well as all of Nick Khan's shares, both vested and non-vested shares, and some of Steve Koonin. We all know Steve Koonin, the executive in charge of the Atlanta Hawks, listing some, not all of his shares for sale. Now, as it turns out, it's not even that this is a 14-day-old story, but that this is something that has been listed since the merger was completed in September. Yes, all of Vince McMahon's shares, all 28 at that time, million of them, were listed for sale since September. All, not some, all of Nick Khan's shares, vested and unvested, restricted and unrestricted, were listed for sale since September. Nonetheless, this story from Sportico, described as a breaking story from Scott Soshnick, the editor-in-chief of Sportico, himself no stranger to coverage of issues surrounding WWE business. I can never forget his interview of Stephanie McMahon from 2021 as WWE was about to run its partial capacity WrestleMania coming out of COVID.
I'm going to do the interview with this over my shoulder. Is that okay? Or should I put it on the waist? Should I do it this way?
There was a filing on Friday evening, which was the finalized version, as opposed to the preliminary version that we saw on April 12th. I'm scrolling back and forth between the April 12th filing and the 26th filing, one part, one page, one table, and they are exactly the same. And if you go back to September 15th, Vince McMahon's, all of his shares, 28.8 million of them were listed at the time. And how many shares were listed for Nick Khan? 234,000 of them. The same number that is listed on both of the filings from April. Nonetheless, the big story here, drive-by analysts said, was that Nick Khan has listed all of his shares for sale, despite the fact that he's listed all of these shares for sale since September. Is Nick Khan leaving WWE? Is he on the way out? Not for this reason, anyway. Again, all of these shares have been listed for sale for some 8 months. Is this an omen that he's offloading stock, getting ready to leave or be separated from WWE? No, I don't think so, not at all. But if you read the pages of the wrestling media and their various affiliates, including MSN and Yahoo Sports, you saw headlines such as WWE President Nick Khan has listed entire portfolio of TKO stock for sale, as if this was brand new information. Vince McMahon and WWE President Nick Khan put all remaining TKO shares up for sale. Nick Khan registers to sell all shares of his TKO stock, and so on and so forth. Additionally, some other headlines really describing how separated Vince McMahon is from WWE. Vince McMahon totally severing WWE business ties, listing remaining TKO shares for sale. Vince McMahon is not a part of this company at all anymore. And it's true that on January 26th, he did resign from all roles at TKO and WWE, no longer the executive chairman of TKO. He still has, as of this moment, as far as we know, about 8 million shares, which is just under 5% of the stock. And it's just under 10% of the Class A shares. That is the former WWE shares. Remember, Endeavor owns just over half of the company. But if you really want to think about whether or not Nick Khan is going to be with WWE in the long term, years from now or in the medium term, I don't think you look to anything regarding these filings that are being accentuated in recent days about all of his shares being listed for sale. But instead, you should read yet another boring document, Nick Khan's employment agreement, his amended, well, the most recent version we have of it, of course, as we all know. We remember when Nick Khan's employment agreement was published for the first time when he joined the company in August of 2020. We all remember. And the massive equity awards he got as part of his agreement. He got something that are called tranches, I think. He got really big stock awards that vest at various periods over time. He's still got, some of them have vested already, but still as we sit here on September 30th, 2025, over a year from now, another $16.5 million of TKO stock, however many shares that equals to at that time, will vest to him. That is after the point at which his contract under its current term will expire. His term says what? The parties agree that the term of this agreement and Khan's employment is intended to be 5 years from Khan's start date of August 5th, 2020. So this employment contract is a 5-year employment contract, and it is set to expire August 5th, 2025. So just over a year from now. Will he stay? Well, we've mentioned this. People who listen to this program often, and probably Pollock and Thurston too. He's got another year and a few months left on his contract. Maybe they'll renew it and keep him. Maybe he'll go on to another company. Who knows? You could definitely imagine Nick Khan's services being much in demand to many different media and sports companies and agencies, talent agencies, and things like that. So who knows? But is Nick Khan on his way out of WWE? Not any more than his employment agreement said. Are there politics abound between Ari Emanuel and Endeavor and Nick Khan? I have no idea, but you could certainly invent some stories. He does have compensation. Not only is he paid a salary, but a lot of his compensation is based on performance, which I think is at the discretion of the board. So based on how they evaluate his performance and executives' performance, to the degree to which is based on how they meet certain goals for that year, they are compensated with stock. So there's plenty of reason financially directly for Nick Khan to want to see the TKO stock do well, because he will be getting stock as part of his performance awards, as well as he's got another $16.5 million in TKO stock coming to him just after the term of this employment contract expires. Will we see documents? We all love documents here. This is the document lovers club. Will we see documents if Vince makes future sales? I don't know. He is now a sub 5% owner, which makes the requirements less for disclosing. He's not an executive. He's not a board member. Those things would probably make it required for him to have to disclose. But now he's no longer an executive, no longer a board member, no longer a 5% owner, although he is a 9.9% owner of Class A shares. So that's where the I don't know comes from. I'm not clear on if the requirements apply to you if you do have more than 5% of a class, but not 5% of the company. He has more than 5% of the former WWE Class A shares. In any case, will we see documents if and when Nick Khan makes stock transactions? Yes, provided he is still a TKO board member and or a high-level executive at that time. Here's the SEC directory showing you every single ownership transaction Nick Khan has made. None of them have been sales. He has made no stock sales of TKO or W stock ever. He has made some in-kind transactions, which I understand are to cover taxes. And then there's these return transactions, which was part of the merger of the converting the W stock to the TKO stock. That's it. When he makes sales, we will see it. And in fact, I would think what we're going to see, this is really exciting here and revelatory. I would kind of expect to see is a 10b5 form. You heard me. A 10b5 form, which is George Barrios did one of these. Remember George Barrios? He made a stock sale transaction plan. It's basically, I'm going to be selling a lot of stock over time, and I'm giving you, the public, a lot of advance notice about this. So we might see something like that. And if Steve Koonin makes sales, which many of his shares are listed, not all of them, but almost all of them. I don't know. He's like 3 out of 4,000. If he makes sales, he's a TKO board member. He will have to file a form for us, and Nick will have to file a form for us as well if he's a board member, an executive at that time. This Sportico article, it's interesting that the timing of it, there's always plausible deniability here. So is it coincidental? It is coincidental, certainly at the least to that. Tony Khan is referring to WWE as the Harvey Weinstein of pro wrestling. And then we have a headline a couple hours later, illustrating, expressing that Vince McMahon, he is totally separated from this company. well, it's sort of in the air to criticize wrestling media at the moment, justifiably so. I think a lot of it, though, is driven by the emotional reaction to the annoyance with which many people have towards certain outlets, certain people in the wrestling media. Not to judge that or dissuade that, but that's the small game. And if we're talking about what allows power to accomplish certain communications objectives, the wrestling media is a relatively small piece of that relative to the business world. And what is this? What is this subtitle? Sportico, the business of sports. We're talking about places like Sportico, CNBC, Sports Business Journal, The Athletic, NBC News, mainstream media, who talk to the business world, business partners. They talk to the people who control the majority, the vast majority at this point, of WWE's revenue. Wrestling fans, they don't collectively bargain. Their power is not concentrated. They're not really discerning these messages anyway. But business partners do have a lot of power and a lot of concentration. They're not nearly as fragmented as the masses. When Slim Jim falls, it's kind of a matter of time before the rest of them would have fallen. Therefore, Vince McMahon resigned. And I would suggest that the wrestling media, you could often criticize, and I have, for being sycophantic, for being not that thoughtful in the questions that they pose towards some of the highest level executives in WWE and AEW, but that the sports media, who has even greater power and influence over WWE and AEW than the wrestling media do, that their willingness to cooperate with a message, that their unquestioning positivity at times towards wrestling companies is an even bigger deal, that warrants and does not receive the same criticism or greater criticism. Okay. We'll move on.